If you liked this episode of the Hockey IQ podcast, please leave a like, a comment, and especially review our podcast. If you truly listened all the way to the end and you're listening to this right now, you enjoyed this episode. Please go and give it a 5-star review. That helps us out more than you know. Thank you so much and look forward to the next one.
I really appreciate that because I think every coach or even parents that are going to listen to this are going to come across and be like, you've either been in that situation or seen someone in that situation who thinks they're unbelievably talented, which they may be, but they're not getting what they deserve or what they should get because they're so talented. And it's way more, and especially from a coach's perspective, I think of like Reichel with the Blackhawks, like unbelievably talented guy on skill alone should be in the NHL, but he's found himself back in the AHL. And it's like talent, great. That's going to get you in the conversation in the room, but really, what are the attributes that are going to make you effective? Or like, how do you go about utilizing those talents to be efficient with the ice time that you get? So it's not like I'm the best at per 60 this. It's like, okay, but I can't put you in these situations, or you're not effective. Like, I think the ultimate positive you can give a hockey players, like you make your teammates better. You know, like you're easy to play with, that kind of stuff. And it's like the effectiveness, the efficiency overrides a lot of the skill and talent that you see out there.
Well, the next level you're going to move up. You're probably most players, 9 out of 10 players are going to start at the bottom rung of that next level. So you get called up in the NHL, you're probably not replacing the top guy in the power play. More than likely, you're not. So you're going to start out as the lowest guy on the totem pole. So do you have the traits to battle from that point forward? And you need those traits. You can't overlook those traits. So if you think your skill set before you get to the NHL, and I'm not telling you, you need to develop your skill. So never should this be misconstrued that you don't keep developing your skill. But if you think that you're owed something, an opportunity at the next level, you're probably not going to get it. You're probably not going to be able to sustain success. You may get the opportunity, but you're probably not going to sustain it. It's the guys that feel they have to earn it. And they're the ones that are continually investing in a real simple thing. If you're a coach and you can look at it, where lots of players make mistakes, and this happens a ton at the NHL level, they get up there and they're come to try out and they're trying to prove to you as a coach, I can do this. I have good hands. I have, you know, I'm a highly skilled player. I'll prove to you I can score. You expose yourself by trying to prove yourself. You can't read a play anymore. And the elite of the elite at the NHL, you'll be -3 in no time when you're trying to prove. You got to go there and try to figure out, what is the team asking of you? What role are you in? What slot are you in? What job has been delegated you by virtue of that slot? And how do I get this job done? And somewhere along the way, a puck may pop out loose. You've got to be able to read it and jump on it and score that goal that you think you can score. You're not going to impose your will on your opposition. And most talented players imposed their will or their skill on the opposition against guys that'll never play in the NHL. So you get really comfortable with that and a real big false sense of confidence that, oh boy, I'm good. And I'll try to bring this to a clearer picture. If you were the fastest guy in your league and you scored 40 goals, so college hockey or junior hockey or Bantam hockey, you're the fastest guy in the ice and you scored 40 goals. When you move up a level, you may not be the fastest guy in the ice. You're going to be probably an average guy, say. And 35 of your 40 goals were scored because you blew by a defenseman. So you had 35 goals because you were faster than the defenseman at that level. Now you move up and you're average. So there goes your 35 goals that you scored. Now you're a 5-goal scorer. And I don't think many people take the time to understand that you can address your skill set, but it's always at the previous level. So you can say, I have hands, I have vision, I have strength, I have hockey sense. It's all at your previous level when you jump to that next one. So, and again, there's super talented guys that, may hang on to 1 or 2 of those attributes, but they're not hanging on to 10 of them.
I'm curious how that like evolves into managing your own self-identity, because like you have to have an identity of some sort. But you can't be rock solid as I do this, I am this. Because to your point, what does that team need of you? How do you make yourself useful? I've never seen anyone get promoted because they did a terrible job, but they're really good at the power play. So you should put me there. They had to make those incremental steps to show, hey, I can do this before they get the next opportunity. And that identity piece almost is like evolving, yet solid.
Yeah, I mean, some guys get that initially, but in essence, if we're just talking about the NHL level, say the highest level, and it's the same if every level you move up. So you're moving up to that next level. When a coach makes a decision, coaches' jobs are to win. And that's how they process it. And coaches want to win. So you're thinking, when I put a player on the ice, is this guy going to help me win? And specifically at the NHL level, most goals scored are manufactured, or there's systematic movement up and down, and then they take advantage of a breakdown. It's not a lot of goals scored where you just impose your will on the other player and they just can't handle it. I mean, we see that a little bit with Nathan McKinnon and a little bit in instances with Connor McDavid, where they impose their will. They're just faster and more skilled, and no matter who was there, they're still scoring the goal. But that's a rarity in the NHL. So there's a process to it. And that's experience. So that's why experience is so valuable in the NHL. Most young players and most players hop over the boards, and you ask them, what do you do? What's your objective when you hop over the boards? And they'll think, to score a goal. That's what I want to do. And if you think about it, they'll have 15 to 20 shifts in a game. Nobody scored 15 or 20 goals in a game. So you can't possibly score every shift, but that's your focus every time you go over the boards. I want to score a goal. I want to score a goal. So you're thinking, I want to score a goal. I want to score a goal. How about you go over the boards and you say, I want to read plays? Because that's what the best of the best do. They hop over the boards, and the guy that wants to score a goal, everything is random to them on that ice. Every shift looks different than the last shift. The guy that wants to read plays, he's hopping over the boards and he's saying, how is this similar? Oh, this movement's going to go over there. I'm going to pick that puck off. It's probably going that way. And that's what experience you see as players get more experience in the NHL. They pick up more patterns within the game in the NHL, and they know when a breakdown is going to happen and how it's going to happen. And they have confidence in that instant. Wow, I can execute here. There's going to be a guy open in a second because where I picked this puck off. The younger players or less experienced players, every shift is more random. There's more random in every shift. And there's less consistent to the shift. And how many times does a winger get a pass on the wall? And you watch some of the players in the NHL, and the more experienced players realize there's only 4 or 5 different things that can happen when I get this puck passed to me on the wall. Either the D's coming down to pinch or he's not. A tracker's coming toward me or he's not. So I'm going to read what 98% of the time it's going to happen. It's going to be one of these 3 or 4 things with confidence and poise. Another guy may get that same pass on the wall that he's going to get 1,000 times and think it's a random situation. And you see him tense up and panic and turn a puck over or not give a good pass or take the puck back. So when you move up to levels, yes, you're only going to move up because of your skill. That's going to get you the opportunity, but you better learn the game, because you're not going to impose your skill on the game at that next level without knowing the game itself. And that's the difference. So I say this, it's tough to teach players that are really skilled at youth hockey this, because they're just getting by on their skill. And you, as a coach, don't even bother trying to teach them that systems and stuff, because they'll never get drafted if their skill doesn't keep getting better. So it's really a major shift. And this is that is pre NHL and pre pro hockey. It should be skill, skill, skill. But when these players try to make a step and make a career out of this, they got to know the game. So it's interesting. They're never going to get that chance if they don't have skill. But once they get that chance, they better know the game or learn it fast.
Yeah, being a good learner is a hack in itself. And like if you just worked on being a great learner, how fast you can pick up skills and tactics, it will be a lot easier. That's something I've been working on with a lot of my kids over the past year, my off ice sessions. It's just around how do we become better learners so we can pick up more things and be adaptable. But I don't know if I want to go back to it or just kind of bring it to light a little bit more of like players start a lot of times just by being more assertive. And they have to learn that patience of the game and get in the flow and the rhythm of the game rather than forcing moments every shift. Like there may be certain times that you can force it, but it's unlikely to be every single shift. And to your point, like you may want to score every shift, but is that what the shift is asking of you? I always like to say, like, third line, your goal is to get it from the defensive zone to the offensive zone and then get off. Like, that's a good win of a shift. If we chip in some goals, that's extra gravy. But, like, I just find a lot of players that have success, then they come into high school and they've just been the more assertive player forever. Well, now pretty much everyone's assertive because you have to be. And it just gets to a point where you've got to learn the patience and the role, and to your point, learning the game itself and what is it asking of you, and then getting into a pattern recognition rather than just being completely random. So you have a repeatability and a predictability that you and your teammates can work off of to make plays fast and to a point where it's very hard to keep up with, regardless of the opponent.
Well, everything you said there makes me want to run a practice or two at the high school level just for the challenge of it. But it is challenge. But what makes me think of the youth levels, especially the boys level 17, 16, 17, 15, 16, 17, they have so much adrenaline and energy that it's hard to calm them down. And just the energy gets the best of them. So it is hard. You can do some stationary drills in practice where they just pass the puck as opposed to skating. You can do drills of where you wear them out and then you do a little more systematic. I use that as a strategy. We talk about the bag skate. You have a group that's tired, and then you go into some teaching. That's some training, some coverage situations, or some transition situations where guys need to kind of hold their position, get them a little bit tired, and they're better because they're forced to actually read now. Their legs aren't going. I like to keep a team in the defensive zone. That if we're doing defensive zone work, you go on offense first, so you expend all that energy because you're trying to score, like every young player wants to, and then they're tired, and then you put them in the defensive zone and you say, okay, key now, guys, is to hold the inside ice, stay in shot lanes, and deny pass lanes. So they're already tired. They don't want to run around, and they realize, oh man, the puck just keeps coming to us. This is incredible. So you use those dynamics, and they have those aha moments, like, wow, this was easy, man. And I always tell the players, like, the net's right there. So if you're ever worried about it, go back into the lane of the net. They're going to bring the puck to you, or you're going to buy yourself time for your deep partner and everybody else to get back. So you find those little simplicities within the game. But this is the stuff I love, that the challenge of, developing that player. And a lot of it is that awareness. Again, controlling that energy. As I mentioned, guys just hop over the boards. They want to score a goal, and you can't score every shift. So you're probably have the wrong objective. I think that should be an underlying objective. Yeah, you want to score, but you want to do something else prior to that, or learn something else prior to that. So
Yeah, I love doing something similar where it's like we'll work on snapping hard pucks around, and then we'll go into another drill where it's nothing but touch passes. Just the readjustments. We get like proper weighting on pucks over time, where there's
that
an
sounds
actual
great.
intentionality.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Good.
a
I
beautiful
like it.
challenge. It's hilarious.
Yeah. I like it. It's good.
All right, I got a last few things here, maybe some quick hitters for us to kind of touch on. So we've really been talking a lot about like how do we accelerate player growth. I think one thing for me, and I'm curious your thought as well, and it can be away from the rink, but we always want to get them thinking. But I always found one of the biggest indicators of future growth potential is just accurate self-assessment. Like if you can accurately self-assess, you can be a very, honest person with what do I need, then you normally are humble enough to take coaching to actually get where you need to be and make those huge steps in growth. Like we had a house player come to us, and 2 years later, he won all league defensemen, and he's our captain as a junior. So like that was something I indicated. Then we had a freshman this year who had been rookie of the year if they had that award for our league. And same exact thing where it was just a player who had such great accurate self-assessment where they almost became their own best coach and they had the humility to take coaching rather than I have to make the mistake on my own and then we'll finally learn it.
I think that is an absolute rarity that a player can accurately self-assess. I think it's a rarity, but it's a gem. It's it's an unbelievable attribute if you have that. What I've also seen, so I've seen players that have that, and then I've also seen the next best scenario or an equally good scenario is it players that are ultra critical of themselves. So they may not necessarily self-assess well because they're actually too hard on themselves. I was awful tonight. I didn't do this. And they're driven. I got to be better tomorrow. But they didn't really know how to self-assess because they weren't awful. They just know they want to be better. So they're driven. And I can think of lots of superstars in the NHL that I've been around that are that way, where they may not self-assess, but they're really hard on themselves. They never think they played well, and they always think they need to play better, and that drives them. And then there's guys that just self-assess very, very well. I mean, Charlie McAvoy comes to mind, even Austin Matthews, where these guys they could evaluate their game extremely, extremely well. And that's, as you said, they would never be who they are today without that attribute. So you can say, oh, this guy's in the NHL because of this and that. There's certain guys that is or if you're a youth player, aspiring NHL player, you can say, I want to I look at these certain NHL players, like I mentioned, McAvoy and Matthews, and you say, oh, I'm going to develop my skill like they did. I'm going to, emulate this, the way they move up the ice, the way they shoot, the way they pass, whatever. But you'd be missing, to your point, Greg, one of their greatest attributes, the ability to self-assess. And yeah, it's coachability falls in line with that. You want players. I think NHL teams are very, they go through the combine, they go through player interviews. They're looking to see how coachable are you as a player and as a person as well, which kind of goes with that. It's not as deep as what you're saying there, but that's a unbelievable gem of an attribute to have to be able to self-assess.
And to your point, like the criticalness is also good to have. I find sometimes, especially with my age group, like you have the player that's so critical, like they come off and like I was terrible, and like they're not actually thinking, okay, what was terrible about it? So like that's the challenges for me as a coach of like helping them through that process of like you can be ultra critical. Maybe we should be a little bit kinder to ourselves, but like get to the point instead of going good or bad, why?
Yeah.
And again, getting people
Yeah.
thinking being the positive thing, because once we're out there it's tough to think, but where can we guide our eyes, guide our minds, to your point earlier about the wingers, like these two things you can pretty much make your read super simple every single time.
Yeah. I'm sorry. What was the question on that, Greg? Just,
No real question, just a comment
yeah.
of like the self-criticalness is like
Yeah.
a great attribute, but some people can go over the top of going straight to good or bad rather than okay, what was
Yeah.
good or bad about it that helps them get into that process of improvement.
Yeah. It's when you mention a player of that nature, being critical on himself and confronting you as a coach right away. I always looked at that player and thought, this player is reaching out for help. He's feeling pressure, and maybe even fear of failing, and he needs some reassurance. I was really bad there. I was really bad, and I need to be better. It to me, that player is feeling pressure from somewhere. He's feeling outside pressure, and so my instinct would be to help him with that outside pressure and say, hey, um, here's where you were really good. Like there's areas where you should give yourself credit here, and reassure him that nothing's ever going to be perfect, and that's okay. But there's things you did really well and you have control over. Mm-hmm. So that player's almost telling me, I don't know what I can control. I feel like it's out of control. I have no clarity. Is what makes me think of when you mentioned, as you did, a player coming up to you like that. So I think that's a quick read by you as a coach. As okay, this is how I have this type of player now, or this person's feeling he's in this type of situation. So this is how we're going to coach him, how we can help him. Because that happens at the NHL level. Guys they're confused. They don't know. Maybe you got a guy in a trade and you got him in a trade because he was in the doghouse on the other team, and now he comes to your team and he's still feeling like he's in the doghouse. I mean, there was one player that I had and we picked up in a trade at one point over the years. This is over the years, and I remember thinking, I'm going to grab this player just to see him. I have a hunch on him. And I said, I need you to see me tomorrow, or I'd like you to stop by my office tomorrow. Not today. I got a couple things I got to do after practice, but I got a couple clips I want to show you from last night's game. And I had a feeling that was going to make the player really nervous, because he was right away going to associate the coaches calling me in the office. I'm in trouble. These must be really bad clips. And he's just going to get this mechanism going and I had a hunch on it. And so sure enough, I come off the ice. I'm doing my thing. And one of the assistants comes in and said, what did you say to that player? And I said, why? Why did you ask? And he said, well, he's a mess. He said, you had clips for him and he doesn't know what he did wrong. And I said, that's exactly why I said he did nothing wrong. I need him to think. I need him to realize he's going an avenue he should never go. He's got to get rid of this. He's got to just breathe. So the player, before he left the building that day, said, you got those clips? And I said, no. I said, we'll see you in the morning. Tomorrow, I got a couple other things. So the next morning he comes in and I said, yeah, I went over them again. They're really nothing. But he came in the first thing in the morning, one of the first players there, right in my office, because he'd worked himself up on this. And so what I needed him to do was just trust that a coach isn't always going to be barking at him. I'm not always going to bring negative to him. And I needed that part of the relationship. I needed our relationship to build that way, because he came in with all this anxiety of what am I going to do wrong next? Why, and a lot of times that's, in his previous situation, when a coach went up to him, it was a negative. Well, I wanted to get rid of that in our situation right away so we could get to work. And we did from that point, but I think that was a good starting point.
Love that. I feel like you have to redefine your relationship with the coaches, because it's probably not been the greatest in the past if that's the case. And yeah, sometimes you can just pull a kid in as a coach and say, hey, check this out. This was awesome. And it could be a nothing clip for everyone else, but for you and that relationship, it's fantastic. Curious on two things that you did in your time with the Sabres. You paired veterans and newbies together, like the new people with the people who had been here for a little bit. Curious for that. And then the second piece was like a player really struggled in a situation, and it wouldn't be maybe the next night or a few nights or a few games later where you put them back in that same tough moment or situation again, where I feel like a lot of coaches would not do that, or like you have to work your way up the depth chart rather than trying to put the newbies and the veterans together. So I'm curious your mindset on those two specifically.
Yeah. What comes to mind immediately before I even talk specific with the Sabres or with previous coaching is what can the player handle? How far can you move the player? How fast? You have to have that timetable in your mind. And what's the situation and context you're putting them in? Is there peer pressure on this player? Again, where's he at in his psyche? Where's he at in his ability, skill and ability and experience within the context of maybe your opponent at that moment or next opponent? So those are all going through your mind. With the Sabres, we were in a situation, not a unique situation. Teams are in this all the time. We were young. We were a very young team. We absolutely needed to get better. So I've got to use NHL situations, and I felt there's no you can't will experience on somebody. So they have to be put in a situation to gain the experience, to gain the hindsight, to gain, oh yeah, now I understand better. I've gone through it. So you also have to have time to put them in a situation, then review it if it's unsuccessful. Sit down on film, talk about it, get their thoughts. What was their thought in this situation? What did they perceive? I felt I was under pressure. Well, let's watch it. And you tell me if you were under pressure. And I would pull them in video and say, tell me, remember this last night, what happened in the game? Oh, yeah, I do. Okay. So you remember it. Tell me what you're feeling right now before we run the video. And then we'd run the video and say, okay, what do you feel now? Well, boy, I had way more time than I thought. Way more time. Now he got better. So at that point, I'd say, okay, we're probably going to be in this situation the next 3 games. We're going to be, up a goal with a minute left. You're going on the ice. So you're better than you were last night. Be ready for your next one. And now I've hopefully helped that player improve. Or I've certainly moved him toward improvement because there's more awareness and he has a better vision of and they might have a better vision of what's expected from myself or us as coaches, but within that situation. So it's a tough league to do it. I told lots of people we're in a league that absolutely demands winning, but we're in a situation that demands development even more. And that was, you coach a young team in the NHL. That's the challenge you have. You're in a league that demands winning. You're in a situation that demands development. And, you have to focus. You have to have a focus and a mind on both of them all of the time. So there's no better way to gain experience in game situation. We had to put our guys in those instances over and over and over. Unfortunately, they're still young at 23, even though they've gone through experiences. They're still young. We all were 23. We were way different at 27 than we were 23. We were way different at 30 than we were at 27 or 23. It's just the way it is. And hockey players are no different. The more reps you get at the NHL level, the more confident and comfortable you get. And again, your situational awareness grows immensely as time goes. And that's a big part with the NHL with young players, situational awareness. They don't understand. They have a harder time grasping that every single thing is a situation. You just recognize it or you didn't recognize it. Hopping over the boards on a line change is a situation. Do you have situational awareness? Have your defenseman been on the ice if you're forward for a minute and a half? Who's on the ice on the other team? Are they fresh? You can't get on the ice and just do what you want to do right away. Maybe you need to get your defenseman off the ice. So if you have the puck in neutral ice, instead of trying to make a play or a flat pass, you recognize you got 2D changing behind you, get it in. So yeah, you have to use, for me, I was in a situation that was a circumstance of the team I was coaching. So we really did have to focus on development.
And I love the buddy system. Do you have your swim buddy? Help guide those newbies, whether they be, 22-year-old newbies, 24-year-old newbies, or 18 just drafted, Benson type newbies, where it's like you're going to need some guidance, a little bit of help.
The other side of that, Greg, was definitely I trusted the guys we were lining them up with, but I also, as the veterans, and you mix the veterans and the young guys, but I also needed young guys to become leaders and better leaders in that responsibility. So it was hand in hand. We didn't have a lot of experienced players on our lineup. So, our talented guys and our go-to guys were in their mid-20s. Tage Thompson was 24 and 25 when 23, 24, 25, Middlestead, Darlene. So these weren't guys that were 30. So when I paired them up, it forced them to be even more leader and give back where maybe they wouldn't have until they were 27, 28, 29, 30. So it actually was good for the older players because they weren't that old either. So they were learning on the fly too, and then taking more responsibility for our team. As a coach, the ultimate for you is to hand everything off to your leadership on your team. The less you have to coach, the more you have to coach, the more unfortunate it is for you as a coach. It's the way it is. The less you have to coach means you have one heck of a hockey team, and you want to get to that point. So handing it off to Tage Thompson and Rasmus Dahlin at the age of 23, 24 was good for them.
Finding an opportunity to give away some responsibility to players. That's awesome. We can all learn from that. Wrapping this up, because I know we've got you for quite a bit, and same with the listeners at this point. Just curious on two quick things. And the first one may not be that quick, but I have to ask the question. So we talked a little bit about like the vulnerability, like having the ability to embrace vulnerability within this process. Like how do we, one, get that psychological, the trust that we're giving, but then two, also with the accountability as well, because we have this vulnerability, we're going to accept reality, we're going to have good assessment, we're going to become our own best coach, take responsibility. But at the same point, we're trying to have the accountability to ourselves and to our teammates. That could be a lot of pressure. And if you've never been accountable to something before, it's very difficult, or another level. I think about like architects, they're building these big skyscrapers. Well, you're now accountable for the lives of thousands or tens of thousands of people. If anything happens to that building, or that building topples into another one, blah, blah, blah. Like there's another weight that comes as you continue to grow, but also still having the ability to be authentic and embrace and have vulnerability within the group and yourself.
Yeah, I think what comes to mind as you're saying that is lots of communication and support from the coaches and the coaching staff. And lots means constant support, constant positive reinforcement from the coaching staff. And I think, the generations need it more, but I think people need it more. We always think about, this next generation needs more support, needs more of this or more of that, or they're different. We are all different today. It's not just the next generation. We're all different. We live in a different world. We all need more support. We all need greater feedback, faster feedback, consistent feedback. Now, nowhere should this be misconstrued with pushing, demanding, non-negotiables. So I'm not taking the stern side of coaching away, because as you said, this is a serious business. And you use the architect example. That's a way more serious business because you're talking, literally lives at that point as part of your responsibility, keeping people safe. But this is, as far as hockey and coaching, driving people, pushing people. So the job that you want to do as a coach and you're really tasked to do is to get as much out of your team as you can and win. Those are the two things you're trying to do. And they go hand in hand, obviously. But you can't, if you don't have to give that up. And by being supportive, by being encouraging, by giving feedback, everybody needs a vision. Everybody needs to know where they stand. And I know with my staff, we talked about that just about every day. Does he know where he stands after last night's game? He might think we're mad at him for this because he didn't play in the third period. Somebody's got to get to him. I'm probably not going to get to him until after practice today. So somebody grab him when he walks in the building here so he has a good practice. We're not mad at him, but he lost his last 5 shifts of the game because he didn't do this. So they know right away. And obviously, I'm not saying that to the media. I'm not doing any. I chose not to do any of those types of things publicly. I think our business is our business behind the scenes. But again, I'm not taking away you being, as a coach, stern and pushing by saying communicate and talk to these and support these guys every day.
Love that we're working as a staff towards that. And like, I almost love like little challenges to your staff as well. Like one thing I love to do is have like almost like a monthly theme. I'm not going to like make it an obvious thing to the staff, but just like, hey, let's give less answers to the players this month. Like, let's
Love it.
not tell them right away. Like, get
Love
them
it.
thinking, ask them good questions. So, love that you're kind of doing that with your staff. Like, how are we working together? You've mentioned a few other times around things. So I just want to bring that to the forefront real quick. And the last thing I have is just like, what are some daily habits or some weekly habits that you've seen of successful coaches and players?
Well, just the fact or the just what you mentioned, daily habits, that can go under the radar, never thought of, but that's an intangible. And where I saw the importance of daily habits and routine, first of all, I don't think you're going to stay in the NHL. You might get there because you're talented, but you're not going to stay there and you're not going to have a good career if you don't have good, strong daily habits. And the better that is, the closer you are going to get to reaching your potential and being consistently effective. Everything is your daily habits and routine. And if they're not good, and as an individual or as a team, that's when you could win one game and then you're so happy and elated. I scored 3 goals, but my routine's not good. You may not, you get such a high, you may not score a goal for the next month because your routine's not good. And you may never recognize that that's the problem or that's the challenge. Where I saw this specifically was at the American League. So there was one summer after I'd coached in the American League for 5 years or so, and I'd coached in the East Coast League for 3 years at the time. So I had 8 years of players at pro level, put them all in a database or a spreadsheet. And I looked at them and I looked at their personal characteristics and traits. And I highlighted guys that were in the NHL and stayed there, one color, and then another color of guys that didn't stay there. They got called up and sent back down. And these guys might have been first round picks or very prolific, talented players, but they didn't stay. And the daily habits were one of 3 or 4 real differences between the group that stayed in the NHL and the group that didn't. Talent, everybody in both groups had enough talent to play in the NHL, but group A that stayed there, their daily habits were way better than group B that had just as much talent, but couldn't get to the NHL and stay there. They got there, but they couldn't stay there. And here's the perfect visual of it would be if you're coaching your American League team, you have a Halloween party, the guys stay out till 3 a.m., 4 a.m., they're having a blast. No problem. But the next morning, player A, that's going to have an NHL career in the future, his routine was to get to the rink at 8 a.m. for a 10 a.m. practice. His routine was to go in the weight room, stretch out, go see the trainer, get some treatment, get ready for video, maybe talk to an assistant coach. What's going on in practice today? He was there at 8 a.m., even though he got home at 4 a.m. He felt terrible. He had a headache. He was dehydrated, whatever it was. He got there at 8 a.m. because that was his routine. Player B, every bit as talented, maybe even more talented, woke up and said, I got a headache. Even though I get to the rink at 8 a.m., I'm going to sleep till 9:15 and go to the rink and then jump on the ice for practice. I saw that in numbers. Those players got their shot in the NHL, couldn't sustain it. Poor daily habits, poor routine. The other guy, a little bit less talent. Sometimes, talent wasn't the discrepancy, but that guy made it. You want reliable people in any job, any major business. We're in the business of hockey. You put a guy on the ice, you need to know he's reliable. because you know the situation every time you're coaching. And guys that have good structure in their life in the form of daily habit and routine is one example, are way more reliable in the long run. And when they're more reliable day to day, they develop more day to day. So they'll pass the other guy up in no time.
All right. Anything else stick out in that database as you were reviewing?
Lots of things. Yeah. Lots. You got to use, same with players. Our coaches, same as players. You're trying to become better. I'm competitive about coaching and want to be better every day. I want to make sure I'm better every time I go out. So I look back, take a lot of notes, and I study what transpired in my coaching career and what I was around. So yeah, lots. That was an amazing project for me at a young age. That having that player pool to then reflect on. I will say this as a scout, and I've scouted a ton, as I mentioned. You never know what the coach was asking of the player. So even though you're evaluating, you can't evaluate his response to what the coach asked or designated him. You can't. So when you're the coach, you can. So every one of these players, I know what was asked of them. I know whether they did it or didn't do it. And so you learn personalities and, again, love of the game or not love of the game. You can read. And so reflecting on all that taught me that I need to do that every time, every year. And you become better at that. You pick out this personality type or this person in this situation, and your speed to coaching them is that much faster as a result. Or tasking an assistant coach. Then you probably need to grab this player and talk to him about this situation, knowing you've already seen it. You're ahead of it. So yeah, I encourage any coach to just reflect on the day before and the season for sure.
Reflection is good for us all. Love that. Donnie, this has been fantastic. Anything that we should hit that we haven't? I think we've run a gamut of a lot of good
No, I
stuff
probably
on developing people.
anybody
and
hung
players.
on this long, man, you deserve to go. So yeah, cut this thing up, make it a little shorter, would you? That's it.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Don, appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it as well. Always nice to talk hockey, and you do a great job. So thank you for having me on.
That concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch your buttes here next week for a brand new episode.